Hey there! Tonight we're not exploring grand feasts or lavish banquets, we're stepping into the most intimate moment of medieval life. The first meal that broke the darkness of night on one side, a lord of Valdris awakening in silk-lined chambers, where servants prepare honeyed cakes and imported wine on the other, a grain worker in the village of Thornmere stirring watery gruel over dying embers, wondering if today's meager portion will sustain another day of backbreaking labour. This is about more than food. This is about the chasm between survival and indulgence. 2 morning rituals that reveal the brutal truth of medieval hierarchy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. If this kind of gentle historical storytelling helps you drift into peaceful sleep, feel free to give the video a like and subscribe, but only if it brings you that quiet satisfaction of learning something fascinating before you rest, and please let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love discovering how these medieval mornings travel across the world before they fade into your dreams. What you're about to discover will change how you think about breakfast forever. Because in medieval Aldermarch, the morning meal wasn't just sustenance, it was a declaration of your place in the world. It announced whether you were among the blessed few who could afford to break their fast with delicacies, or among the countless masses who scraped together whatever scraps they could find to quiet their gnawing hunger in the grand estates of Ravenscroft, where Lord Aldwin the Bold held court breakfast was theatre, every bite performed before witnesses, every dish a symbol of divine favour. Golden chalices filled with spiced wine from the vineyards of distant Selmore. Wheaten bread so white it seemed to glow in the candlelight, eggs from prized hens that roosted in heated coops, and honey that travelled 1,000 miles from the apiaries of Summerfall. These weren't just ingredients. They were proof that God smiled upon those who ruled. But in the muddy lanes of Bramblewood, where Gareth the miller's son woke each dawn breakfast, meant something entirely different. It meant crushing barley between stones worn smooth by generations of desperate hands. It meant watching children fight over crusts of black bread. It meant mothers who gave their portions to babies and fathers who pretended they weren't hungry, so their families could eat one more spoonful of thin porridge. The medieval world you're about to enter spans the realm of Westmarch, during the reign of King Aldric III in the year of our Lord 1347, a time when a single harvest could determine whether entire villages lived or starved, when spices cost more than gold, when the distance between the nobleman's table and the peasant's bowl measured not just wealth, but the very meaning of human worth. You'll witness how Duchess Morwen of Goldenhall begins her day surrounded by silver platters and servants who taste each morsel before it touches her lips, ensuring not just safety, but perfection, while just beyond her castle walls in the settlement of Milhelven, young Willem the Thatcher's apprentice breaks his fast with water-soaked oats and dreams of the day he might taste real butter. This isn't just about what people ate, it's about how breakfast revealed the invisible chains that bound medieval society together. How the morning meal reinforced who deserved comfort and who deserved struggle. How the first food of the day whispered the truth that some bodies were worth nourishing, while others existed merely to serve in the monasteries of St. Dunstan's Abbey. The monks break their silence with prayers and simple porridge, believing that humble food brings them closer to God, while in the merchant halls of Riverside Quarter, successful traders like Master Godwin feast on imported figs and aged cheeses. Proving that commerce could buy a seat at Fortune's table, you'll discover why Lady Constance of Millbrook considers it sinful to eat before the sun fully rises, while Marta the Brewster's widow has been awake since before dawn, grinding grain by moonlight, because her family's survival depends on selling fresh bread to early risers who can afford such luxuries through the winding streets of Crownport, where ships bring exotic foods from lands with names like distant music. You'll see how geography determined destiny, how those born near trade routes might taste cinnamon, while those in remote villages of Thornglen never imagined food could be anything but brown and bitter. This is the story of 2 worlds sharing the same sunrise, one where breakfast meant choosing between honey cakes and sweet pastries, the other where it meant choosing between hunger and slightly less hunger, one where servants warmed bread by the fire, the other where families huddled around dying coals hoping to soften yesterday's crusts in the halls of Ironhold Castle, where Sir Edmund the Brave holds court breakfast arrives on silver platters carried by pages who bow with practised precision, while in the thatched cottages of Mudbrook village families share wooden bowls carved by grandfathers who died believing their grandchildren would know better days. You'll experience the weight of pewter spoons in noble hands and the splinters of wooden utensils that cut peasant tongues. You'll smell the richness of roasted meats in great halls and the thin sourness of desperate stews in cramped cottages. You'll feel the warmth of heated stones that kept lordly bread fresh and the cold that turned poor families' water to ice. So take a deep breath. Dim whatever lights surround you, settle into comfort that would have seemed miraculous to most medieval souls, and let's step into these two very different dawns where the sun rose on the same world, but illuminated completely different realities, where breakfast wasn't just the first meal of the day, but the first reminder of exactly who you were allowed to be. Let's begin with the moment when hunger calls, and see how two human beings separated by birth and bound by the same human need answered that call in ways that would define not just their morning, but their entire existence in the unforgiving hierarchy of medieval Aldermarch, where your first bite of the day declared your worth to God and king alike. You wake before the rooster crows, not because you choose to, but because your body knows hunger better than any clock. The darkness in your one-room cottage in Millhaven village is absolute. No windows, just gaps between wooden planks stuffed with straw and mud that never quite keep out the cold. Your name is Godwin, and you're a serf bound to the lands of Lord Aldrich, though right now you're just a man whose stomach feels like it's eating itself from the inside. The first sensation isn't sight or sound, it's the gnawing emptiness in your belly that's been your constant companion for 3 days now. Yesterday's evening meal was thin gruel made from barley husks and whatever weeds your wife Myrta could gather before dark. It wasn't enough. It's never enough anymore. Not since the harvest failed and the manor's grain stores became as precious as gold. You roll off the straw mattress you share with Myrta and your 2 children, little Wolf and baby Gita. The straw crackles beneath you, releasing that familiar smell of mould and decay. Some of the straw has been there so long it's more dust than bedding. Your back screams as you sit up. The damp cold has settled into your bones overnight, making every joint feel like rusted iron. The cottage is silent except for the soft breathing of your family and the occasional drip of water from the leaky thatch above. Somewhere in the darkness you hear the scratch of tiny claws. Rats, probably, though you've learned not to investigate too closely. Sometimes it's better not to know what shares your home. Your bare feet hit the dirt floor, and the cold shoots up through your legs like lightning. No wooden planks here, no rushes to soften the ground, just packed earth that turns to mud when it rains and dust when it's dry. You feel around in the darkness until your fingers find the rough wooden bowl that holds your breakfast. Well, what passes for breakfast when you're lucky enough to have one? Inside the bowl your fingertips touch something hard and unyielding. Yesterday's bread, if you can call it that. It's a dark, dense chunk made from barley flour mixed with ground acorns, dried peas, and whatever else Myrta could stretch the grain with. The local miller, Thorvald, has been adding sawdust to the flour when he thinks no one's looking. Everyone knows, but no one complains. Sawdust fills the belly, even if it tastes like chewing wood. You lift the bread to your nose and smell mould. Not the white fluffy kind that might just scrape off, but the green-black spots that mean the bread is slowly poisoning itself. Your stomach clenches with hunger, warring with the part of your mind that knows this could make you sick. Hunger wins. It always does. The bread is so hard you could probably use it as a weapon. You've seen men break teeth on bread like this. Watch them spit blood and keep chewing because the alternative is starving. You carry the bowl to the small clay pot that sits near the dying embers of last night's fire. Inside is water. Not fresh, not clean, but wet enough to soften the bread so you might actually be able to swallow it. The water has a skin of ice on top that you break with your knuckle. The sound seems impossibly loud in the dark cottage. You dip the bread, and it barely yields, absorbing the freezing water like a stone might. While you wait for it to soften enough to bite, you blow on your fingers trying to get feeling back into them. Outside you hear the first stirrings of the village. Old Henrik's cow lowing. The lucky bastard still has a cow. The scrape of someone's door opening. A cough that echoes in the cold air. Soon the church bell will ring for morning prayers, and your day of labour will officially begin. But first, this ritual of survival disguised as breakfast. You take your first bite, and it tastes like desperation mixed with dirt. The bread has softened just enough that you won't break a tooth, but it still feels like chewing leather. Bits of grit from the millstone probably crunch between your molars. You chew slowly, partly to savour what little you have, partly because rushing might make you sick. Myrta stirs behind you. and you hear her soft intake of breath as consciousness returns and brings with it the memory of hunger. She doesn't speak. What is there to say? You both know there's no more bread. You both know today's labour will be harder on an empty stomach. You both know that tomorrow's breakfast depends entirely on whether Lord Aldrich's steward remembers that workers need food to work. The fire has gone out completely now, leaving only cold ashes and the memory of warmth. No breakfast cooking over friendly flames this morning. No porridge bubbling in an iron pot. Just you, sitting in the dark, choking down mouldy bread and wondering if this is the day your body finally gives up. But somehow, it never does. You finish the bread, drink the last of the dirty water, and prepare to face another day in the service of men who will wake to feasts you can't even imagine. You drift toward consciousness not from cold or hunger, but from the gentle sound of a lute being plucked somewhere in the distant corridors of Ravenscroft Manor. Your name is Lord Aldrich of Ravenscroft, and you wake as you have every morning for the past 23 years, surrounded by luxury that most humans will never witness, let alone experience. The massive four-poster bed beneath you is a marvel of craftsmanship, carved from oak trees that grew for a century before being felled specifically for your comfort. The mattress isn't stuffed with mouldy straw like the peasants endure, but with the finest goose down, collected from birds raised in the manor's own wetlands and plucked by servants whose entire purpose is maintaining your sleep. The sheets against your skin are imported linen from the Flemish territories, so fine they feel like cool water against your flesh. Above you, heavy curtains of deep burgundy velvet hang from the bed frame, embroidered with your family crest, a silver raven clutching a golden wheat sheaf in its talons. These curtains don't just provide privacy, they create a warm cocoon that has protected you through the night from the draughts that plague even the finest castles. The air around you smells faintly of lavender and rosewater, scents that have been deliberately scattered throughout your chambers by servants who arrived hours before dawn. You don't immediately open your eyes because you don't need to. No urgency drives you from sleep, no gnawing hunger, no cold seeping through inadequate walls. Instead, you lie still and listen to the orchestrated awakening that unfolds around you like a carefully choreographed dance. Somewhere beyond the curtains, you hear the soft whisper of slippered feet on rushes. Your chamberlain, Aldwin, moving with practiced silence as he prepares for your emergence into consciousness. The fire in your private hearth crackles steadily, tended through the night by a page whose sole responsibility was ensuring your chambers never grew cold. The wood burning there isn't the damp, smoky kindling that peasants scavenge from forest floors, but seasoned birch and apple wood that releases a sweet, clean smoke. The warmth radiating from the fireplace has kept your chambers at the perfect temperature all night, neither too warm nor too cool. You stretch languidly, feeling the silk nightrobe shift against your skin. Even your sleeping garments are a luxury beyond most people's imagination, tailored specifically for your body by the manor's personal seamstress, made from silk that travelled along trade routes from distant Constantinople, handled by dozens of merchants and guards before arriving at your private quarters. The first gentle knock comes at your chamber door, 3 soft taps that signal the beginning of your morning ritual. You don't respond immediately because you don't have to. This isn't a request or an urgent message. It's simply Aldwin informing you that your morning meal is being prepared in the kitchens below. The breakfast being crafted for you at this very moment represents more wealth than most families see in a lifetime. When you finally speak, your voice carries the calm authority of a man who has never doubted that his needs will be met. "Enter," you call, and the heavy oak door swings open with barely a whisper. Your chambers are large enough that 3 peasant families could live comfortably in the space you occupy alone. Tapestries depicting scenes of your ancestors' victories cover the stone walls, their rich blues and golds gleaming in the firelight. Aldwin approaches with the measured pace of a man who has performed this ritual 1,000 times. Behind him come 3 other servants, each carrying elements of your morning preparation. One bears a silver ewer filled with warm water that has been heated in the kitchens and scented with herbs from the manor's private garden. Another carries towels made of the finest linen so soft they feel like clouds against skin. The third holds your morning robe, a garment of deep green wool lined with ermine fur. You sit up slowly, and the bed curtains are drawn back with ceremonial precision. The movement reveals your private chamber in all its splendour, carved wooden furniture inlaid with ivory, silver candlesticks that cast dancing shadows on the walls, a writing desk where correspondence from nobles across the kingdom awaits your attention. A single prayer book, illuminated with gold leaf and bound in leather so fine it might have been made from the hide of unicorns, rests on a stand near the window. The warm water is poured into a silver basin that gleams like a mirror. You don't wash yourself. That task falls to Aldwin, who approaches with the reverence of a priest performing a sacred ritual. The water is the perfect temperature, tested by multiple servants before reaching your presence. As it touches your face, you smell the herbs that have been steeped in it. Rosemary for clarity of thought, mint for freshness, and something exotic that arrived with the last caravan from the southern kingdoms. Your hands are dried with towels so soft they seem to absorb moisture by magic rather than friction. The ermine-lined robe is draped over your shoulders with movements so practiced they flow like a dance. Every gesture, every moment of preparation reinforces the central truth of your existence. You're not just a man, you're a lord, and the world bends itself around your comfort. Through the tall windows of your chamber, stained glass filters the morning light into jewelled patterns on the floor. The glass itself represents a fortune, coloured with pigments that cost more than most peasants earn in a decade, shaped by craftsmen whose skills are passed down through generations like family treasures. The view beyond shows your private gardens, where herbs for your breakfast table grow in neat tended rows under the care of gardeners who know that a single wilted plant could mean their dismissal. Aldwin speaks in measured tones about the morning's schedule. Your breakfast will be served in the solar, that bright chamber where tall windows welcome the day's first light. The cook, Master Crispin, has prepared what he calls a modest morning repast, though his definition of modest would feed a peasant family for a week. Today's breakfast will include fresh bread baked from wheat so white it seems touched by snow, eggs from hens that are fed better grain than most humans consume, and preserved fruits that arrive from orchards hundreds of miles away. You nod approvingly as Aldwin describes the meal awaiting you. This isn't just food, it's a daily reminder of your position in the world's hierarchy, a delicious demonstration that you exist in a realm far above the desperate scrambling of common folk. In a few moments, you'll rise from this bed and walk to a breakfast that represents more luxury and abundance than entire villages see in a year. But for now, you simply sit in the warmth of your perfect chamber, listening to the gentle sounds of a manor awakening to serve your every need. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You shuffle through the muddy lane that connects the cottages of Millhaven, your wooden clogs squelching with each step as you make your way toward the communal bread oven. The mouldy crust you choked down earlier has only sharpened your hunger, like throwing a pebble into an empty well. It makes the emptiness echo louder. Your stomach growls so fiercely that Myrta glances at you with worry etched across her weathered face. She carries baby Githa wrapped in scraps of wool, while little Wolf trails behind, his bare feet blue with cold. The village oven belongs to Lord Aldrich, like everything else in Millhaven, and using it costs precious grain that you can barely spare. But today is different. Today, Myrta discovered something that might save your family from another day of gnawing hunger. A cache of forgotten turnips buried beneath the collapsed corner of your neighbour Egbert's cottage. Egbert died of fever 3 weeks ago, and his widow Brunhild has already fled to her sister's village, leaving behind whatever provision she couldn't carry. The turnips are half rotted, their flesh soft and brown in places, but they're still food. Mixed with the handful of barley you've been hoarding and some wild garlic myrta gathered by the creek, they might become something resembling a meal. Not a good meal, not even a satisfying one, but calories enough to keep your children from the kind of weakness that turns into death. At the oven, you wait behind Dunstan the cooper and his wife Helga. They're baking what looks like actual bread, not the sawdust-stretched disaster you managed yesterday, but something that might actually contain mostly grain. Dunstan catches you staring and shifts protectively over his dough. Food makes suspicious enemies of neighbours who once shared ale and stories. When your children are hungry, other people's bread starts to look like theft waiting to happen. The oven itself is a massive stone dome that the village shares according to a schedule enforced by Reeve Godric, with the enthusiasm of a man who enjoys wielding small powers. Everyone brings their own fuel, wood, dried dung, whatever burns, and the cost is measured not in coins but in portions. The baker, Fat Willem, takes his cut from every family's baking, a tax paid in bread that keeps him well fed while others scrape by. When your turn finally comes, you slide your meager preparation into the oven's mouth. It's barely worthy of the name bread. More like a desperate paste of turnip mash, barley fragments, and hope. The wild garlic might mask some of the turnip's bitterness, but it won't hide the fact that you're eating what most people would feed to pigs, if they were lucky enough to own pigs. While the mixture bakes, you think about breakfast as it used to be, before the harvest failed and the manor's demands grew heavier. There were mornings when Myrta could brew ale thick enough to feel like food, when eggs appeared in your chickens' nests regularly enough to seem like miracles. You remember the taste of honey, actual honey, not the tree sap and berry juice mixture you sometimes managed to concoct. That was during the good years, when Lord Aldrich's wars were distant things that didn't require quite so much tribute from his lands. The smell emerging from the oven is optimistic. Not good exactly, but not the putrid stench you'd feared. When Willem finally slides your creation out with his long wooden paddle, it looks like a flat greyish disc marked with brown spots where the turnip has caramelised. It's dense as a stone and about as appetising, but it's warm, and warmth counts for something when your body is burning its own muscle for fuel. You break the disc into portions with hands that shake slightly from hunger and cold. Myrta gets the largest piece because she's still nursing Githa, though her milk has grown thin and scarce. Wolf gets the next largest because growing children need food more desperately than adults. You take the smallest portion, telling yourself it's enough, knowing it isn't, accepting it anyway because this is how survival works. You take what exists and pretend it's sufficient. The turnip bread tastes like dirt mixed with desperation, but your family eats it with the focused intensity of people who understand that this might be the only warm food they see today. Wolf chews methodically, his young face serious with the weight of hunger. Myrta closes her eyes as she eats, maybe imagining better flavours, maybe just trying not to think about taste at all. Between bites, you sip from a leather flask filled with what passes for ale in desperate times. It's weak, sour and cloudy, brewed from grains so poor that most of it probably shouldn't be consumed by humans, but it's liquid calories, and it helps wash down the turnip bread's gritty texture. The alcohol content is minimal, just enough to kill some of the water's dangerous elements, not enough to provide any escape from the reality of your situation. Other families around the oven area are conducting similar rituals of making do. Old Maud tears her bread into tiny pieces and soaks each one in watered ale until it becomes soft enough for her few remaining teeth. The blacksmith's apprentice, young Kyle, gnaws on something that looks more like charcoal than food. Everyone pretends not to notice what others are eating, maintaining the fiction that these are normal meals rather than acts of desperation. You think about the feast days of your childhood, when your father was still alive and the harvests came regularly. St. Swithin's Day brought roasted meat and fresh bread. Harvest festivals meant apples and honey cakes. Even ordinary Sundays sometimes included eggs or cheese. Those memories feel like stories about other people now, fairy tales about a world where food was celebration rather than mere survival. The turnip bread sits heavy in your stomach, more filling than nutritious, more bulk than nourishment. But it's something. It's breakfast. It will keep your family alive for another day, long enough to forage for more wild plants, long enough to hope that tomorrow might bring better luck, long enough to continue the endless grinding work of staying alive in a world that seems designed to kill people like you. As you gather the remaining crumbs and prepare to face the day's labour, you offer a silent prayer to whatever saint handles the desperate prayers of starving peasants. Not for abundance, that's too much to hope for, just for enough. Always, only, just for enough. You stand shivering in your cottage, pulling on the same woolen tunic you've worn for the past 6 days. The fabric is rough against your skin, woven from coarse sheep's wool that your wife Myrta spun during the long winter evenings by firelight that barely illuminated her fingers. The tunic hangs loose on your frame. You've lost weight since the harvest failed, and clothes that once fit snugly now drape like empty grain sacks on your diminishing body. The colour of your tunic was once a serviceable brown, dyed with walnut hulls and oak bark that Myrta gathered herself. Now it's faded to an indeterminate shade somewhere between mud and old blood, stained with months of honest labour and honest sweat. There's a tear near the left elbow where you caught it on a thorn bush while gathering firewood. Myrta patched it with a scrap from an old blanket, but the repair is obvious. Lighter brown thread against darker fabric, marking you as a man who can't afford to replace what breaks. Your brays, the loose linen undergarment that covers your legs, were white once. That was several seasons ago, before repeated washings in cold stream water turned them grey, then yellow, then a sort of defeated beige. The drawstring at the waist is fraying, and you tie it carefully, knowing that when it finally snaps, you'll have to make do with rope or go without entirely. The fabric is thin enough now that it provides little protection against the rough wool of your outer garments. You wrap strips of cloth around your legs in place of proper hose, cloth cut from Myrta's old kirtle when it became too tattered to wear. The strips are uneven, rewrapped so many times that they've stretched and distorted. One piece is darker than the others, a remnant from baby Githa's swaddling clothes that became too soiled to use for an infant. You wind them carefully, overlapping to avoid gaps where cold air might penetrate. Your feet slide into wooden clogs carved from a single piece of oak by the village woodworker, Aldred the Crooked. They're crude things, hollowed out with simple tools, rough enough inside that they've worn calluses on your feet where they rub. The left clog has a crack running along the side that you've filled with pine resin and bound with sinew. When it rains, water seeps through anyway, leaving your feet perpetually damp and cold. You have no stockings, no soft leather boots, no metal buckles or bone toggles. Your belt is braided rope, knotted where it's beginning to fray. The knife hanging from it is your most valuable possession, a simple iron blade with a wooden handle wrapped in strips of leather. It's used for everything, cutting bread, carving wood, gutting the occasional fish, and defending your family if the need arises. The blade is nicked and worn, sharpened so many times that it's noticeably thinner than when your father passed it down to you. Myrta helps you arrange your cloak, a patched rectangle of undyed wool held together by determination and desperate stitching. It's full of holes despite her constant mending, and you position it carefully to hide the worst of the damage. The cloak pin is a simple iron thorn, bent and rebent so many times that it's more rust than metal. When you fasten it, you do so gently, knowing that one day soon it will simply crumble apart. Your head covering is a simple cloth cap, sewn from scraps and designed more for warmth than appearance. It's shapeless, colourless, and bears the stains of honest work, soil from the fields, soot from the hearth, sweat from your labours. Myrta tries to wash it when she can, but soap is a luxury you can't afford, and cold water alone doesn't remove the accumulated grime of survival. Looking at yourself in the polished metal disc that serves as your mirror, a luxury you inherited when your neighbour Egbert died, you see a man shaped by necessity. Your clothes announce your status to anyone who cares to look. Serf, labourer, a man whose entire wardrobe could be purchased for less than a lord spends on a single pair of gloves. But they're clean enough, mended enough, and warm enough to keep you alive, which is all you really ask of clothing. You help Myrta dress little Wolf in his own collection of patches and hand-me-downs. His tunic is actually a cut-down version of one that belonged to his older brother who died of fever 2 winters ago. The sleeves are still too long, rolled up and tied with scraps of string. His feet are bare, he can't afford clogs for a growing child, and he'll have to make do until his feet stop growing or you find leather somewhere. Baby Githa is swaddled in whatever soft fabric Myrta could find, mostly old undershirts torn into strips, pieces of worn linen and cloth salvage from garments too damaged to repair. The swaddling is practical rather than pretty, designed to keep an infant warm in a cottage that never quite manages to be comfortable. Myrta's own clothing tells the same story of careful preservation and constant mending. Her kirtle is patched in so many places that it's hard to tell what the original fabric looked like. Her wimple, the cloth head covering that modesty requires, is grey with age and wear. Her apron bears the stains of cooking, cleaning, and tending children, evidence of a life spent in service to survival. You all look exactly like what you are, peasants preparing for another day of labour in service to people who will never understand what it means to own only one set of clothes. Your appearance marks you as clearly as if you wore signs around your necks. In a world where clothing announces status, yours whispers poverty in every stitch, every patch, every careful repair. But you wear these clothes with whatever dignity you can muster, because they're yours, and they're enough to face another day. You adjust your cloak one final time, check that your knife hangs securely, and prepare to step out into a world that judges men by their garments and finds you wanting. Still, you're dressed, you're warm enough to work, and you're ready to do whatever labour this day demands of you. You rise from your magnificent bed as a symphony of servants orchestrates your transformation from sleeping lord to the living embodiment of divine authority. Your morning dressing is not simply about covering your body. It's a daily ritual that reinforces the natural order of the world, a ceremony as sacred and significant as any performed in the chapel below. Master Aldwin approaches carrying what appears to be a length of the finest linen you've ever seen, so white it seems to glow in the firelight. This is your chemesia, your undergarment, woven from flax grown in the Flemish territories and processed through techniques guarded more carefully than military secrets. The linen is so fine that it took 6 months to create enough fabric for a single shirt, spun by women whose entire lives are devoted to achieving this impossible softness. As Aldwin slides the chemesia over your head, you feel the whisper of luxury against your skin. The fabric is so light it seems made of woven air, yet so warm that it creates its own microclimate around your body. The stitching is invisible to the naked eye, each seam reinforced with threads so delicate they might have been spun by angels. The collar and cuffs are embroidered with silver thread in patterns that tell the story of your lineage, ravens and wheat sheaves, interwoven with symbols representing your family's victories in battle and prosperity and peace. Next comes your brays, but these bear no resemblance to the rough linen strips that peasants wrap around their legs. Yours are tailored precisely to your measurements by Master Godfrid, the manor's personal seamster, a man whose grandfather served your grandfather in the same capacity. The brays are made from linen almost as fine as your chemesia, dyed a subtle blue with indigo that travelled here from kingdoms so distant their names sound like fairy tales. Your chausses follow, not crude cloth strips, but perfectly fitted leg coverings made from the finest wool available in all of Christendom. The wool comes from sheep raised on the manor's own lands, but not just any sheep. These animals are fed grain that many peasants would consider a feast, brushed daily by dedicated shepherds, and protected from weather in stone shelters that are warmer and drier than most human dwellings. The chausses are dyed a deep forest green using a technique that requires crushing thousands of beetles imported from Mediterranean ports. Master Aldwin and his assistant, young Osric, work together to attach your chausses to a belt of the softest leather you've ever encountered. This belt was crafted from the hide of a bull that lived a pampered life on the manor's finest pastures, then processed using oils and techniques that transformed simple leather into something approaching art. The belt buckle is silver, cast by the manor's own metalsmith, and engraved with your family crest so finely detailed that you can see individual feathers on the raven's wings. Your tunic arrives next, carried by 2 servants because its weight and importance demand such ceremony. The base fabric is wool, but wool so fine it feels like silk beneath your fingers. It's been dyed the deepest burgundy using cochineal insects that cost more per ounce than most peasants earn in a lifetime. The colour is so rich and deep that it seems to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating an almost hypnotic depth that speaks of wealth beyond imagining. But the tunic's true magnificence lies in its embroidery. Master craftsmen spent 8 months decorating this single garment with threads of actual gold, silver and silk, dyed in colours that don't exist in nature. The patterns tell stories, your ancestors' great deeds, religious symbols that announce your piety, and heraldic designs that proclaim your right to rule. When you move, the metallic threads catch the light and create a subtle shimmer that makes you appear touched by divine radiance. The sleeves of your tunic are works of art themselves, cut wide in the latest fashion, and lined with ermine fur so white and soft it seems like crystallized winter. Each ermine pelt represents a small fortune, and your tunic contains dozens of them, sewn together by seamstresses whose skill approaches the supernatural. The cuffs are trimmed with pearls imported from the distant Orient, each one perfectly round and lustrous, representing months of a pearl diver's dangerous labour. Your surcoat completes the ensemble, a sleeveless overgarment that displays your heraldry for all to see. The fabric is silk, genuine silk that travelled along trade routes guarded by armies and blessed by priests. The silk is so pure and fine that it seems to float rather than hang, moving with your body like liquid luxury. The heraldic designs are not painted or dyed, but created with actual precious stones, sapphires for the raven's eyes, topaz for the wheat sheaves, garnets for the decorative border. Osric kneels to place your shoes upon your feet, and even these humble items represent more wealth than entire villages possess. Made from the softest leather imaginable and dyed to match your tunic perfectly, they're decorated with silver buckles and silk laces. The soles are constructed from multiple layers of the finest leather, ensuring that your feet never feel the cold stone floors or detect any imperfection in your path. Master Aldwyn produces your cloak, and the morning light streaming through the stained glass windows transforms it into something approaching the supernatural. Made from the finest wool and lined with sable fur that required the pelts of dozens of the rarest animals, it drapes around your shoulders like liquid nobility. The cloak pin that fastens it is a masterwork of the goldsmith's art, a miniature raven carved from obsidian and set with diamonds that sparkle like captured starlight. Finally, your circlet is placed upon your head, not quite a crown, for you save that for state occasions, but a band of gold so pure it seems to glow with its own internal light. Set with gems that represent the four corners of the known world, it weighs almost nothing yet carries the weight of absolute authority. As you stand before the great mirror, polished silver so perfect it reflects like still water, you see not just a man, but a living symbol of divine order. Every thread, every jewel, every carefully crafted detail announces to the world that you are chosen, elevated, set apart from common humanity by the will of God himself. Your clothing doesn't just cover your body, it transforms you into something more than human, a walking testament to the natural hierarchy that places some men above others. When you move, silk whispers and gold gleams, creating a visual and auditory reminder that you exist in a realm far beyond the comprehension of ordinary mortals. You step out of your cottage into the grey pre-dawn light, your stomach still gnawing with the hollow ache that has become your constant companion. The air bites at your exposed skin, carrying the smell of wood smoke, animal waste, and the damp earth that never quite dries in Millhaven village. Today, like every day, your body belongs to someone else, and the work that awaits you will drain whatever strength last night's meager rest managed to restore. Your first obligation pulls you toward the manor's vast grain fields, where winter wheat lies dormant beneath a thin crust of frost. Reeve Godric stands near the stone boundary marker, his thick frame wrapped in a woolen cloak that marks his slightly elevated status among the manor's workers. He doesn't look at you as you approach. Eye contact might suggest you're equals rather than master and beast of burden. Instead, he gestures toward a section of field where yesterday's wind has blown debris across the carefully prepared furrows. The work begins before the sun fully rises. You kneel in the frozen mud, your hands already numb inside their cloth wrappings, and begin the tedious process of clearing stones, broken branches, and dead vegetation from the planting rows. Each stone must be carried to the field's edge and added to the endless wall that marks Lord Aldric's boundary. Each branch must be bundled for kindling. Each clump of weeds must be shaken free of soil and saved for the manor's compost piles. Your back screams within the first hour. The combination of malnutrition and repetitive labour has left permanent knots in your muscles, painful reminders of a body pushed beyond its limits day after day. You straighten occasionally, pressing your hands against your lower spine, trying to work out cramps that feel like iron spikes driven through bone. But rest is a luxury you can't afford. Godric watches constantly, and workers who pause too often find their food rations reduced even further. Beside you, your neighbour Dunstan works in similar misery, his face grey with exhaustion and hunger. His wife Helga died last month of a fever that might have been curable with proper food and warmth, leaving him to care for 3 young children while maintaining his full work obligations. You've seen him weeping while he labours, tears freezing on his cheeks as his hands continue their mechanical motions through the soil. The morning progresses with brutal monotony. Clear stones, bundle branches, pull weeds, move to the next section. Your hands bleed through the cloth wrappings, leaving dark stains on everything you touch. The cold has penetrated so deeply into your bones that you've stopped shivering. Your body has given up trying to generate warmth it can't sustain. You work in a kind of trance, your mind disconnected from the physical suffering, focused only on the rhythm of survival. Around midday, Godric calls a brief halt to distribute the day's water ration. Each worker receives a small wooden cup filled with liquid that's more mud than water, drawn from a well that's been contaminated since the autumn rains. You drink it anyway, feeling the grit between your teeth, knowing that thirst will kill you faster than whatever diseases the water might carry. The brief rest allows you to notice that young Kyle, the blacksmith's apprentice, has collapsed near the eastern boundary. No one moves to help him. Work time is not rescue time, and showing concern for a fallen worker might be interpreted as laziness. The afternoon brings new torments as Godric assigns you to the drainage ditches that channel water away from the manor house and toward the village. The ditches are filled with autumn leaves, winter debris, and the frozen corpses of small animals that crawled inside seeking shelter and found only death. You wade into the icy water, feeling it seep through your crude clogs and soak your leg wrappings, and begin the disgusting work of clearing blockages by hand. The smell is overwhelming. Decomposition, stagnant water, and human waste from the manor's privies upstream. You breathe through your mouth, trying not to gag as your hands encounter things you prefer not to identify. A dead rat comes apart in your grip, its frozen flesh separating from bone with a sound that makes your stomach lurch. You fling the pieces toward the compost area and reach for the next obstruction. By late afternoon, your clothes are soaked through with freezing water and substances you don't want to contemplate. Your hands have gone beyond numb into a realm of pain so constant it becomes background noise. You've cut yourself on hidden stones and broken pottery, but the cold has numbed the wounds enough that you can continue working. Blood mixes with ditch water and freezes on your fingers like grotesque jewellery. The sun begins to set, painting the sky in shades that would be beautiful if you had the energy to notice beauty. But sunset doesn't mean rest. It means transitioning to evening obligations. You must still help muck out the manor's stables, haul firewood to various buildings, and assist with preparations for tomorrow's labour. The work never truly ends. It only pauses for the few hours when darkness makes productive labour impossible. As you trudge toward the stables, your legs trembling with exhaustion, you pass other workers beginning their evening tasks. The village baker's assistant, Thurston, struggles to carry sacks of grain that weigh more than his malnourished frame should be able to bear. The shepherd's boy, Aldric's namesake called Little Aldric to distinguish him from his lord, drives sheep toward their enclosures with movements that suggest he's operating on pure instinct rather than conscious thought. The stable work is perhaps the worst of your daily obligations. The horses that serve Lord Aldric's household are fed better than you are, their stalls cleaned with more care than your cottage receives, their health monitored with more attention than your children's welfare. You shovel manure by torchlight, the smell mixing with your empty stomach to create waves of nausea that you must suppress. Vomiting would waste precious fluids your body can't spare. Finally, as full darkness settles over Millhaven, Godric releases you from the day's formal obligations. You stumble home through lanes that have turned to frozen mud, your body operating on reserves that shouldn't exist. Tomorrow will bring identical tasks performed by a body slightly weaker than today's, fueled by whatever scraps you can gather for tonight's meal. This is your life. 16 hours of backbreaking labour for the privilege of existing another day in service to people who view you as barely more useful than their livestock and considerably more replaceable. You descend the grand staircase of Ravenscroft Manor with measured steps, your silk-lined slippers whispering against polished stone as servants bow deeply at your passage. The great hall awaits, transformed this morning into the beating heart of your administrative empire, where decisions flow from your lips like royal decrees and reshape the lives of hundreds without your having to witness the consequences firsthand. Master Aldwyn has already arranged your morning audience in the hall's most impressive setting. Tall windows filter coloured light through stained glass that cost more than most villages see in a decade, casting jewelled patterns across tapestries depicting your ancestors' victories. Your chair, not quite a throne but elevated enough to reinforce hierarchy, sits positioned to catch the morning light in a way that creates an almost divine aura around your person when petitioners approach. Your first obligation involves reviewing the manor's account books with Master Benedict, your chief steward, a thin man whose pale fingers are permanently stained with ink from a lifetime of recording other people's wealth. He spreads parchment scrolls across the oak table beside your chair, each one representing aspects of your domain that generate the luxury surrounding you. His voice carries the practiced deference of a man who understands that accuracy pleases you more than optimism. The numbers he recites would stagger peasants if they could comprehend their meaning. Your grain stores contain enough wheat to feed Millhaven village for 3 years, yet you've authorised selling most of it to merchants bound for distant kingdoms, where scarcity has driven prices to astronomical levels. Master Benedict's finger traces columns of figures representing bushels, pounds, and profits that exist as abstract concepts rather than the sustenance they actually represent. Your wool production has exceeded expectations this season, he reports with barely concealed pride. The manor's flocks have produced enough fleece to supply your household's needs and create a surplus that wealthy merchants from the Flemish territories are eager to purchase. You nod approvingly as he describes negotiations with Master Hagen of Bruges, whose agents have offered prices that would fund a small war or build a new chapel wing. The discussion turns to your serf's productivity, and Master Benedict's tone grows more clinical. He reports that field clearing has proceeded ahead of schedule despite the recent death of several workers from winter fevers. The loss of Egbert, he notes, has actually improved efficiency since his widow's departure, freed up cottage space for a younger, stronger family recently acquired from a neighbouring lord's estate. You find this information mildly interesting, but hardly worthy of extended consideration. Peasants die, other peasants replace them, and the land continues to produce wealth. Your bailiff, Master Ordgar, approaches with reports from the manor's various enterprises. The mill has been operating at full capacity, grinding grain for both your household and the surrounding villages. The fees collected from peasants using your mill have increased substantially since you authorised Master Willem to add more sawdust to their flour, a practice that stretches your grain stores while maintaining the same revenue from grinding fees. The fact that this makes their bread less nutritious doesn't factor into your calculations. The morning's judicial obligations begin when Master Ordgar presents cases requiring your personal attention. 3 peasants stand accused of stealing apples from your orchard, their guilt evident in their inability to meet your gaze and the apple stains on their children's clothing. You pronounce judgment without deliberation, a day's wages from each family, to be paid in extra labour during the spring planting. The fact that this punishment might prevent their children from eating for several days doesn't influence your decision. A more serious case involves Godwin, one of your serfs, who allegedly gathered firewood from areas of the forest traditionally reserved for your household's use. Reeve Godric testifies that he witnessed Godwin carrying branches that bore characteristics of wood from the protected groves. You consider the evidence while studying Godwin's hollow-cheeked face, noting the desperation in his eyes but feeling no particular sympathy. Forest management requires strict enforcement, and exceptions lead to chaos. Your verdict comes without hesitation. Godwin will forfeit his evening meal rations for 1 week and perform additional ditch-clearing duties during that period. The punishment serves multiple purposes. It reinforces your authority, provides useful labour, and reminds other serfs that your resources are not theirs to take. That Godwin might not survive this punishment doesn't concern you. Weak serfs who can't follow simple rules have little value to your estate's productivity. The administration of justice flows smoothly into financial planning as Master Benedict presents proposals for the coming season's investments. Your successful grain speculation has generated enough profit to fund several ambitious projects. You could expand the manor's brewing operations, construct additional granaries, or purchase more serfs from lords facing financial difficulties. Each option promises different returns on investment, measured in productivity rather than human welfare. Master Godfried arrives to discuss the manor's textile production, bringing samples of wool and linen that represent your estate's growing reputation for quality goods. He spreads fabrics across the table with the reverence of a priest handling sacred relics, explaining how improved breeding techniques have produced sheep with finer fleece, and how new processing methods create linen of unprecedented softness. You examine the samples with the expertise of someone whose wealth depends on understanding luxury markets. Your conversation with Master Godfried reveals the interconnected nature of your various enterprises. The manor's flax production supplies raw materials for linen weaving, while sheep provide both wool and meat. Surplus agricultural production funds improvements to textile operations, which generate profits that purchase more land and more serfs to work it. Every aspect of your domain serves multiple purposes, creating wealth that compounds like interest on a merchant's loan. The morning's administrative session concludes with planning for the afternoon's inspection of the manor's physical infrastructure. You'll tour the grain storage facilities, examine the mill's grinding stones, and assess the condition of serf cottages to determine which ones require immediate replacement versus which can be patched through another winter. These decisions balance maintenance costs against productivity losses, calculating human suffering in terms of economic efficiency. As servants clear away the parchments and Master Benedict organises the morning's decisions into actionable directives, you reflect on the satisfying complexity of managing a successful estate. Every choice you make ripples through hundreds of lives, shaping destinies and determining survival rates with the casual authority of someone chosen by God to rule over lesser beings. You return to your cottage as darkness settles over Millhaven, your body aching from 16 hours of backbreaking labour, and immediately notice that baby Githa's fever has worsened. Her tiny face burns against your palm when you touch her forehead, and her breathing comes in shallow, rapid gasps that make your chest tighten with fear you can't afford to show. Myrta rocks the baby desperately, her own face gaunt with exhaustion and worry, while little Wolf huddles near the dying fire, coughing with the same wet sound that took his older brother 2 winters ago. There is no physician in Millhaven, no learned doctor with university training to diagnose mysterious fevers or prescribe healing remedies. The closest thing to medical care comes from old Maud, the village wise woman, whose knowledge consists of herb lore passed down through generations of desperate mothers, and whatever folk remedies have seemed to work often enough to be worth remembering. You've already traded your last decent knife for her services once this winter, and she has nothing left to offer except sympathy and prayers. Your family's hygiene exists in a constant state of compromise between cleanliness and survival. The stream that provides your water runs brown with runoff from the manor's stables and the waste of upstream villages. Boiling it would require precious firewood that you need for warmth and cooking, so you drink it cloudy and hope your body can fight off whatever diseases it carries. The bucket beside your cottage door holds water that's been sitting for 3 days, developing a green film on its surface that you skim off before using it to wash your hands. Bathing is a luxury reserved for feast days and warm weather, if at all. Your last proper bath happened during the harvest festival in September, when you and Myrta heated water over an outdoor fire and took turns washing with soap made from ash and animal fat. The soap burned your skin and left it dry and cracked, but for a brief, glorious moment, you felt clean. Now, in the depths of winter, you make do with quick splashes of cold water on your face and hands, leaving the rest of your body to accumulate layers of sweat, dirt, and the residue of honest labour. Your clothes haven't been properly washed since autumn. Myrta tried to rinse them in the stream last month, but the fabric froze solid before she could wring it out, and we had to thaw your tunic by the fire, filling the cottage with steam that smelled of wet wool and desperation. Now your garments carry the accumulated odours of months of wear, smoke from your hearth, sweat from your labour, and the persistent smell of poverty that clings to everything you own. The cottage itself breeds illness despite your best efforts to maintain it. The roof leaks, creating damp spots where mould grows in fuzzy patches that make everyone cough. The floor is packed earth that never truly dries, turning to mud whenever water spills and providing perfect breeding grounds for the insects that torment your family through the warmer months. Rats nest in the thatch above your heads, their droppings falling into your food and bedding with disgusting regularity. You examine Wolf's persistent cough with the helpless expertise of someone who has lost children before. His chest rattles when he breathes, and his skin has taken on the grey pallor that you've learned to fear. There's nothing you can do except wrap him in whatever warm cloth you can spare, and hope his young body proves stronger than the infection trying to claim him. The herbs that might help grow in Lord Aldrich's private gardens, carefully tended and jealously guarded against peasants who might benefit from their healing properties. Myrta's own health deteriorates daily under the strain of nursing sick children while maintaining her household duties. Her monthly bleeding has stopped entirely, a sign that her body has decided reproduction is too dangerous given your family's nutritional state. Her gums bleed when she eats, and several of her teeth have loosened from whatever deficiency disease comes from eating nothing but grain and turnips for months on end. She never complains, but you see her pressing her hand to her side when she thinks no one is watching, favouring ribs that might be cracked from lifting loads too heavy for her diminished strength. Your own body tells the story of a life lived without proper medical care or adequate nutrition. The cut on your hand from yesterday's ditch work has begun to fester, red lines of infection spreading up your arm like poison seeking your heart. You've packed it with mud and bound it with strips torn from your oldest shirt, but you know that infection in winter often means death, especially for bodies weakened by hunger and constant labour. The persistent rash on your legs has spread despite your attempts to treat it, with whatever remedies you can improvise. You've tried washing with lye soap that burned your skin, applying poultices made from crushed herbs, and even the desperate measure of urinating on the affected areas, following advice from Thurston, the baker's assistant, who claimed it cured his similar condition. Nothing works, and the itching drives you to scratch until you bleed, creating new wounds that provide fresh opportunities for infection. Your teeth ache constantly now, several of them loose enough that you avoid chewing on one side of your mouth entirely. One molar has developed an abscess that throbs with each heartbeat, filling your mouth with the taste of corruption and making sleep nearly impossible. You've tried packing the cavity with crushed garlic and salt, remedies that old Maud suggested, but the pain only intensifies, and you know that eventually the tooth will have to be pulled with whatever crude tools you can devise. The family's shared sleeping arrangement ensures that illness spreads efficiently through your household. When one person develops a fever, cough, or skin condition, the others inevitably follow within days. Your single room provides no opportunity for isolation or quarantine, and your shared bedding becomes a perfect vector for transmitting whatever diseases find their way into your cottage. You've learned to recognize the early signs of various ailments, but recognition doesn't provide treatment options when you lack medicine, clean water, proper nutrition, or warm, dry living conditions. Personal hygiene becomes a battle fought with inadequate weapons against overwhelming odds. You clean your fingernails with the point of your knife, scraping away dirt and dried blood that accumulates from constant manual labour. Your hair, unwashed for weeks, has become a greasy tangle that you keep covered with your cloth cap, partly for warmth and partly to hide its condition. Lice have taken up permanent residence in your clothing and bedding, their bites adding to your catalogue of minor miseries. Yet somehow your family endures, your bodies adapting to conditions that would horrify people born to better circumstances. You develop immunities to local diseases, learn to function despite chronic pain and malnutrition, and discover reserves of strength that surprise even you. But each winter takes its toll, and you wonder how many more seasons your family can survive before something finally breaks that can't be mended with determination and prayer. You complete your morning administrative duties and retire to your private solar, where the afternoon light streams through glass windows that cost more than most peasants earn in their entire lives. Here, in this sanctuary of warmth and luxury, you submit yourself to the daily rituals that maintain your health and appearance, with the same careful attention other men might devote to tending their most precious livestock. Master Cornelius, your personal physician, approaches with the measured dignity of a man whose education at the University of Salerno places him among the most learned individuals in the kingdom. His robes are spotless black wool trimmed with ermine, and his soft hands carry the tools of his trade in a leather satchel that bears the seal of the medical college. Unlike the village-wise women who treat peasants with herb lore and superstition, Master Cornelius practices medicine based on the classical texts of Galen and Hippocrates, refined through decades of treating noble bodies. Your daily health examination begins with an assessment of your humours, those 4 vital essences that govern both physical wellness and emotional balance. Master Cornelius studies your complexion in the bright window light, noting the healthy pink colour that indicates proper circulation and adequate nutrition. He examines your eyes for clarity, your tongue for proper colour and texture, and your fingernails for signs of internal distress. Every aspect of your appearance receives scrutiny that would be impossible in the dim, smoky cottages where peasants live and die without ever receiving professional medical attention. The physician produces a crystal vial filled with your morning urine, collected earlier by servants trained to handle such delicate matters with appropriate discretion. Master Cornelius holds the vial to the light, swirling its contents with the expertise of someone who can diagnose illness from colour, clarity, and scent. Today's sample pleases him, pale yellow and clear, indicating that your kidneys function properly and your body maintains the hydration that comes from access to clean water and quality food. Your pulse receives careful attention as Master Cornelius places his educated fingers against your wrist, counting the rhythmic beats that pump noble blood through veins fed by the finest cuisine. He nods approvingly at the strong, steady rhythm, so different from the weak, irregular pulses of peasants whose hearts struggle to function on inadequate nutrition and constant physical stress. Your circulation remains excellent, he notes, a testament to the life of moderate exercise and abundant food that keeps your body in optimal condition. The morning's bathing ritual commences with the arrival of servants carrying brass vessels filled with water, heated to the precise temperature Master Cornelius prescribes for your constitution. The water has been boiled to ensure purity, then cooled and tested to achieve the perfect warmth for cleansing, without shocking your refined system. Herbs gathered from your private gardens, lavender for calming, rosemary for circulation, mint for freshness, have been steeped in the water to create a therapeutic bath that serves both hygiene and health. You step into the wooden tub, lined with linen sheets so fine they feel like silk against your skin, and submit to the gentle ministrations of servants trained in the art of noble bathing. They use soap imported from Castile, made with olive oil and aromatic herbs that cleanse without the harshness of the lye-based soaps that burn peasant skin. The soap creates a luxurious lather that removes any trace of impurity while leaving your skin soft and pleasantly scented. Master Cornelius oversees the process with professional attention, ensuring that the water temperature remains optimal and that your skin receives proper treatment. He examines your body for any signs of disease or injury, noting with satisfaction the absence of rashes, infections, or malnutrition marks that plague the lower classes. Your flesh shows the healthy fullness of someone who has never known real hunger, whose body receives all the nutrients necessary for optimal function. The tooth-cleaning ritual follows ancient principles adapted for noble hygiene. Master Cornelius produces a small brush made from the finest boar bristles, along with a paste created from ground pearls, mint leaves, and honey. The pearls provide gentle abrasion that removes food particles without damaging tooth enamel, while the mint freshens breath, and the honey provides natural antibacterial properties. Your teeth, strong and white from a lifetime of quality nutrition, receive careful attention that prevents the decay and loss common among peasants who chew coarse bread filled with grit. Your hair receives treatment with oils imported from distant lands, almond oil from Mediterranean groves, rosemary essence from mountain slopes, and rosewater distilled from petals that bloomed in monastery gardens. Servants massage these precious substances into your scalp with movements taught by Master Cornelius himself, stimulating circulation and ensuring that your hair maintains the lustrous appearance appropriate to your station. The oils prevent the dryness and parasites that torment peasants who wash rarely and with harsh soaps. Master Cornelius produces a polished silver mirror, its surface so perfect it reflects your image with startling clarity. Unlike peasants who glimpse themselves in murky water or scratched metal, you can examine every detail of your appearance with precision. The mirror confirms what the physician's examination has already established. You are the picture of health and vitality, your body a testament to the benefits of proper care and abundant resources. The daily bloodletting follows, though today Master Cornelius recommends only a small amount to maintain proper humoral balance. He makes a precise incision in your arm, with a blade kept sharp and clean, allowing exactly the right quantity of blood to flow into a silver bowl. The procedure, performed with skill and sterile technique, poses no danger of infection or excessive blood loss. For peasants, bloodletting might be performed by barbers with dirty tools, often leading to infection or death from blood loss. Your midday meal awaits, carefully planned by Master Cornelius to provide optimal nutrition for your constitution. Fresh fruits supply necessary vitamins, quality meats provide strength-building properties, and pure wine aids digestion while preventing the waterborne illnesses that kill peasants regularly. Every ingredient has been selected not just for taste, but for its contribution to your continued health and vigour. As the afternoon progresses, you reflect on the vast gulf between your medical care and the desperate remedies available to your serfs. While they suffer with infected wounds, loose teeth, and chronic illnesses, you receive attention from one of Europe's finest physicians, using techniques and medicines that represent centuries of accumulated knowledge. Your health is maintained not through luck or endurance, but through the systematic application of medical science, funded by the labour of people who will never experience such care themselves. You collapse onto the straw-stuffed mattress as the last light fades from the cottage's single window, every muscle in your body screaming from another day of backbreaking labour. Rest, however, remains as elusive as a full belly in your world. The few precious hours between sunset and dawn must accommodate not just sleep, but the small rituals of survival that somehow make existence bearable despite its relentless hardships. Myrta tends to baby Githa's fever by the dying firelight, humming a lullaby her own mother sang decades ago when times were marginally less desperate. The melody is simple, wordless, passed down through generations of women who understood that sometimes music is the only medicine available to the poor. You listen to her gentle voice mixing with the baby's laboured breathing, and find yourself remembering your own mother's songs, how they made cramped cottage life feel less like a prison and more like home. Little Wolf huddles beside you, his small body shaking with cold and the wet cough that's been plaguing him for weeks. Despite your exhaustion, you tell him stories. Not grand tales of knights and dragons, but smaller stories about clever rabbits who outwit hungry foxes, about peasant boys who find magic beans in their porridge, about families who discover hidden treasures that turn their cottages into palaces. The stories cost nothing except breath and imagination, yet they transform the cramped cottage into worlds where anything might be possible. The village occasionally provides communal entertainment that breaks the monotony of survival. Tonight, through the cottage's thin walls, you hear the sound of old Henrik's fiddle scratching out a familiar tune in his nearby dwelling. The instrument is crudely made and badly tuned, but it carries melodies that speak to something deeper than hunger or fatigue. Sometimes, on feast days when energy allows, the villagers gather in the common area to dance to Henrik's music, their movements clumsy but joyful, their laughter echoing off cottage walls like prayers of defiance against despair. Myrta pulls her spinning wheel closer to the fire, its wooden frame scarred from years of use and repair. The wheel serves dual purposes, producing thread for clothing and providing evening occupation that keeps her hands busy while her mind wanders to better times. She spins wool into rough yarn by firelight, her fingers working with the muscle memory of countless evening hours spent transforming raw fleece into something useful. The rhythmic whir of the wheel creates a hypnotic background that helps everyone in the cottage settle towards sleep. You carve wooden toys for Wolf when strength and materials allow, using your knife to shape scraps of wood into crude animals and simple dolls. Tonight you work on a horse, its proportions wrong and its details rough, but recognisable enough to spark a child's imagination. Wolf watches with eyes that shine brighter than they have in weeks, his illness temporarily forgotten in the magic of seeing something beautiful emerge from nothing more than wood shavings and patient hands. The cottage becomes a temporary theatre as you act out stories with shadows cast by firelight against the earthen walls. Your hands become rabbits, wolves, birds, and dragons, their movements telling tales that make Wolf giggle despite his cough. The shadow plays cost nothing but creativity, yet they provide entertainment more precious than gold coins to a family starved for joy. Myrta sometimes joins in, her smaller hands creating delicate birds and butterflies that dance across the walls. Conversation, when energy allows, centres on memories of better times and dreams of improvement that everyone knows will never materialise. You tell Myrta about the harvest festival 3 years ago when you won the wrestling contest and earned a silver coin that bought meat for a week. She reminisces about her wedding day when her father managed to provide ale for the entire village and everyone danced until dawn. These memories serve as mental escapes from present hardships, brief journeys to times when life held more than mere endurance. Sometimes Thurston the baker's assistant visits, bringing news from the village and stories from travellers who pass through on their way to distant markets. He tells tales of cities where people wear silk clothing, of castles with more rooms than Millhaven has cottages, of lords who feast on exotic foods while their servants live better than most village freemen. These stories seem like fairy tales, too fantastical to be real, yet they provide glimpses of worlds beyond the narrow boundaries of peasant existence. On rare occasions, travelling performers pass through the village, though they rarely linger long in places where audiences have no coins to offer. You once saw a juggler who could keep 5 wooden balls dancing in the air simultaneously, his movements so fluid they seemed supernatural. Another time, a storyteller recited epic poems about ancient heroes, his voice carrying across the village common like thunder from clear skies. These performances remain vivid memories that replay during the darkest moments of hardship. The changing seasons provide natural entertainment cycles that mark time and offer hope. Spring brings the excitement of the first green shoots pushing through winter soil. Tiny miracles that promise eventual abundance. Summer evenings extend the hours available for socializing and storytelling. Autumn harvests, even poor ones, create brief periods of community celebration. Winter, despite its harshness, offers the cozy intimacy of families huddled together around fires, sharing warmth and companionship. Religious feast days punctuate the year with sanctioned opportunities for rest and modest celebration. St. Brigid's Day brings blessed candles and the hope of improved weather. Midsummer Eve allows for bonfires and traditional dances that connect the village to ancient customs older than Christianity. Christmas, despite its religious solemnity, sometimes includes enough extra food and ale to create genuine festivity, even in the poorest households. Tonight, as Wolf finally succumbs to exhausted sleep and Githa's fever breaks enough for peaceful breathing, you allow yourself the luxury of simply existing without working. You watch firelight dance across the cottage walls, listen to your family's quiet breathing, and experience the profound satisfaction of having survived another day together. These moments of peace, stolen from the edges of exhaustion, represent the closest thing to happiness available in your world. The entertainment may be simple, the rest insufficient, and the recreation crude by noble standards, but it belongs entirely to you. No lord can tax laughter, no reeve can commandeer stories, and no steward can measure the value of a mother's lullaby sung over a sick child's bed. You recline in your private solar as the afternoon sun bathes Ravenscroft Manor in golden light, contemplating the evening's entertainment with the casual anticipation of someone whose every pleasure is carefully orchestrated by others. Tonight promises exceptional diversions. Master Florian's troupe of performers has arrived from the royal court at Winchester, bringing with them arts so refined that witnessing them reinforces your position among the cultural elite of the kingdom. Your entertainment begins with the arrival of Master Roderick, your personal minstrel, whose training at the cathedral schools of Paris and Reims places his musical abilities far beyond the crude fiddle-scratching that peasants call music. He carries a lute crafted by the legendary instrument makers of Bologna, its curved body inlaid with ivory and precious woods that gleam like jewels in the afternoon light. The strings, made from the finest catgut and tuned to mathematical precision, produce sounds so pure they seem to have been borrowed from angelic choirs. Master Roderick's repertoire includes courtly love songs composed by troubadours, whose names are spoken with reverence in noble halls across Europe. His voice, trained through years of disciplined practice, can shift from the powerful resonance needed for epic ballads to the delicate intimacy required for romantic lyrics. Today, he performs a new composition about your recent victory in a border dispute with Lord Garrett of Thornwick, transforming political manoeuvring into heroic legend through the alchemy of professional artistry. The great hall has been prepared for tonight's feast and entertainment, with meticulous attention to detail that would stagger peasants if they could comprehend the resources involved. Tapestries depicting scenes from classical mythology hang from stone walls, their rich colours and intricate details representing months of skilled weaving by craftsmen whose talents command princely fees. Silver candlesticks, each one worth more than a peasant family's annual income, cast dancing shadows across polished surfaces that reflect luxury like mirrors made of wealth itself. Master Florian's troupe enters with the ceremony due to artists who have performed before kings and bishops. Their costumes alone represent fortunes: silk tunics dyed in colours that require exotic pigments, cloaks lined with ermine and decorated with golden thread, masks carved from precious woods and painted with techniques guarded more jealously than military secrets. These are not village entertainers seeking coins from dirt-poor audiences, but masters of their crafts who command respect and substantial payment for their services. The evening's first performance features acrobats whose skills defy natural law and suggest supernatural intervention. They leap and tumble through sequences so complex that watching them induces a kind of vertigo, as if gravity itself has been suspended for your amusement. Their movements flow with liquid grace across specially constructed apparatus, ropes, poles, and platforms that transform the great hall into a three-dimensional stage where human bodies become instruments of impossible beauty. Master Sebastian, the troupe's lead jester, approaches with the calculated boldness that distinguishes court entertainers from their crude village counterparts. His humour operates on multiple levels, incorporating classical references that demonstrate his education while maintaining the wit necessary to amuse noble audiences without crossing boundaries that might result in punishment. He performs satirical sketches about neighbouring lords, his mimicry so precise that you recognise the targets immediately, while appreciating the artistic skill required to capture their mannerisms so perfectly. The theatrical presentation that follows represents the pinnacle of medieval dramatic art. Master Florian has adapted a classical tale about Odysseus, transforming ancient Greek literature into spectacle that combines music, dance, poetry, and visual splendour into unified artistic experience. The performers wear masks that cost more than most peasants see in their lifetimes, crafted by artisans whose skills have been refined through generations of serving noble patrons who demand perfection in every detail. Between performances, you sample delicacies prepared specifically to complement the evening's entertainment. Master Crispin has created edible sculptures that mirror the artistic themes being performed, pastry castles that replicate famous fortresses, sugar flowers that bloom impossibly perfect, spiced wines mixed according to recipes that trace their lineage to Roman banquets. Each bite represents culinary artistry that transforms mere nourishment into aesthetic experience. Your guests for tonight's entertainment include Lady Matilda of Ashbrook and her retinue, Lord Edmund of Ravensmore with his eldest son, and Bishop Aldhelm, whose presence lends religious sanction to secular pleasures. Their conversation flows between appreciation of the artistic performances and discussion of political matters that will reshape the region's balance of power. Entertainment serves multiple purposes: cultural enrichment, social networking, and demonstration of wealth that reinforces your position among the nobility. The musical interludes feature instruments peasants have never seen and could never afford. A psaltery whose strings sing like captured starlight, drums crafted from exotic animal hides and decorated with precious metals, wind instruments carved from rare woods and tuned with scientific precision. The musicians perform compositions written by masters whose names are recorded in illuminated manuscripts housed in cathedral libraries, music that represents the highest achievements of human creativity. As midnight approaches, the entertainment reaches its crescendo with a performance that combines all artistic elements into unified spectacle. Dancers move in patterns that mirror celestial movements, their silk costumes flowing like liquid light. Musicians accompany with melodies that seem to capture the music of the spheres themselves. Poets recite verses that transform your genealogy into epic legend, connecting your lineage to mythical heroes and divine favour. The evening concludes with private chambers entertainment as Master Roderick plays softly while you reflect on pleasures that peasants cannot imagine. Your recreation doesn't consist of crude shadow plays or desperate attempts to forget hunger. It represents the finest artistic achievements of medieval civilization, culture that elevates human experience beyond mere survival into realms of beauty that justify the social order placing you above common humanity. In your private apartments, surrounded by luxury that insulates you from the harsh realities endured by your serfs, you experience entertainment that costs more in a single evening than most peasants earn in their entire lives. This disparity seems not just natural but necessary. Someone must appreciate and preserve the highest human achievements, even if that privilege requires the labour of those who will never experience such refinement themselves. You wake in darkness, whether in a hovel or a manor, and for just a moment, that brief, precious space between sleep and consciousness, you are simply human. Neither lord nor serf, neither master nor servant, just a person drawing breath in a world that has not yet reminded you of your place within its rigid hierarchy. In that twilight moment, Godwin and Lord Aldrich share something that no amount of wealth or poverty can touch: the simple miracle of awareness returning to flesh that has survived another night. But consciousness brings memory, and memory brings the weight of identity. You remember, with the cruel clarity that dawn always provides, exactly who you are and what this day will demand of your body, your spirit, your very soul. The peasant feels hunger gnawing at his belly like a living thing. The lord feels the comfortable weight of silk sheets and the knowledge that others will soon arrive to transform him from man into symbol. Both awakening experiences are equally real, equally human, and equally shaped by forces beyond individual control. The morning meal that follows becomes a daily performance of social position, yet underneath the pageantry and desperation alike, both men are simply trying to fuel bodies that require sustenance to continue functioning. Godwin chokes down mouldy bread and tells himself it's enough while knowing it isn't. Lord Aldrich picks at exotic delicacies prepared by others, while knowing he could afford to feed an entire village with what he casually discards. Both men eat not because they choose to, but because biology demands it, and both finish their meals carrying different kinds of hunger. Godwin's hunger is physical, immediate, dangerous, the kind that kills children and makes strong men weak. But Lord Aldrich carries a different emptiness, one that no amount of food can fill. He hungers for purpose beyond mere consumption, for meaning that transcends the accident of birth that placed him above others. Both men go through their days feeding different kinds of starvation, neither fully satisfied by what their stations provide. The labour that defines their days reveals perhaps the deepest truth about human existence. Everyone works, regardless of the work they do. Godwin's labour breaks his body and grinds his spirit, but it connects him to the earth, to the seasons, to the fundamental processes that keep humanity alive. Lord Aldrich's work is mental and political, equally exhausting in its own way, carrying the weight of decisions that ripple through hundreds of lives. Both men collapse into sleep knowing they have spent themselves in service to something larger than individual desire. The diseases that threaten them acknowledge no social boundaries. Plague kills peasant and lord with equal efficiency. Fever burns through hovel and manor alike. When Lord Aldrich falls ill, his physicians can ease suffering and perhaps delay death, but they cannot guarantee survival any more than Old Maud's herb remedies can save Godwin's children. Both men face mortality with whatever resources their positions provide, but death, when it comes, strips away all pretense and reveals the flesh beneath the finery. Love manifests differently across social stations, but remains fundamentally unchanged in its essence. Godwin loves his family with desperate intensity, knowing that loss is always one bad harvest away. Lord Aldrich loves his lineage, his legacy, the abstract concept of nobility that his bloodline represents. Both forms of love inspire sacrifice, dedication, and the willingness to endure suffering for something beyond the self. The objects of love may differ, but the emotion itself transcends social boundaries. Fear, too, visits both cottages and castles with equal persistence. Godwin fears starvation, disease, the Lord's displeasure, and the countless ways that poverty can destroy everything he holds dear. Lord Aldrich fears rebellion, political miscalculation, the loss of divine favour, and the possibility that his careful construction of authority might crumble into chaos. Both men live with anxiety that shapes their decisions and haunts their sleep. Though they worry about different threats to different kinds of security, the entertainment that provides respite from daily struggle serves the same psychological function regardless of its sophistication. Godwin's shadow plays and family stories create temporary escape from desperate circumstances, while Lord Aldrich's elaborate performances provide distraction from the isolation of power. Both forms of recreation offer what humans require, moments when the mind can travel beyond immediate circumstances into realms where different realities might be possible. Even faith operates similarly across social divides. Both men pray to the same God, though their prayers carry different requests. Godwin begs for survival, for his children's health, for enough food to last another day. Lord Aldrich prays for continued divine favour, for political success, for the preservation of the social order that sustains his position. Their prayers reflect their circumstances, but both men seek connection to something beyond human limitation, comfort in believing that existence has meaning beyond mere biological function. Time treats both men with identical indifference. Lord Aldrich may live more comfortably, but his years pass at the same rate as Godwin's. Both men age, weaken, and approach death with whatever dignity their circumstances allow. The peasant's life may be shorter and harder, but each day contains the same 24 hours for both, the same sunrise and sunset, the same cycle of seasons that marks the passage of time regardless of how that time is spent. Perhaps most remarkably, both men dream. In sleep, social boundaries dissolve completely. Godwin might dream of abundance, of tables laden with food, of children who laugh without coughing. Lord Aldrich might dream of simplicity, of honest labour, of love uncomplicated by political calculation. Their dreams reveal desires that transcend their waking realities, connecting them to universal human longings that no amount of wealth or poverty can completely satisfy or destroy. When death finally comes, it arrives as the ultimate equalizer. The peasant and the lord both face that final darkness with whatever courage they can muster. Their bodies return to the same earth. Their consciousness fades into the same mysterious silence. The elaborate funeral processions and simple burials both end in the same destination, human flesh becoming part of the soil that grows the grain that feeds the next generation of peasants and lords. In the end, what endures is not the wealth or poverty, not the feast or famine, not the silk or sackcloth, but the fact that both lives were lived. Both men woke each morning and chose to continue existing despite whatever hardships their circumstances provided. Both loved, feared, hoped, and endured in ways that define human experience across all social boundaries. The medieval world that shaped their breakfast routines has long since crumbled into history, but the fundamental human experiences they shared continue in different forms. We still wake hungry, still labour for survival or meaning, still seek comfort in food and love and faith, still face mortality with whatever resources we can gather. The external circumstances change across centuries, but the internal experience of being human remains remarkably constant. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, remember that every human story, whether lived in hovel or palace, begins with the same simple miracle: consciousness emerging from darkness, awareness returning to flesh, another soul choosing to face whatever this day might bring. In that shared beginning, all hierarchy dissolves, and we recognize ourselves in every other person who has ever opened their eyes to greet an uncertain dawn. You drift deeper into sleep now, carried by the rhythm of these ancient lives that played out their daily dramas, centuries before your birth, yet somehow feel as familiar as your own reflection. The stories of Godwin and Lord Aldrich fade into the gentle darkness behind your eyelids, but their echoes linger like the taste of honey on the tongue or the memory of a half-forgotten song. In the quiet space between waking and dreaming, you might find yourself wondering about the morning that followed our tale, that next dawn in 1347, when both men woke once again to face another day in medieval Astamore. Did baby Githa's fever finally break, allowing Murta to sleep without the crushing weight of maternal fear? Did Godwin's infected hand heal enough for him to continue his backbreaking labour, or did the red lines of poison finally claim another victim of feudal indifference? Perhaps Lord Aldrich woke that next morning with an unusual restlessness, some inexplicable urge to walk among his lands and see the faces of the people whose labour sustained his luxury. Maybe he paused at his solar window and noticed, for the first time, the thin streams of smoke rising from the village cottages, and wondered briefly what kind of breakfast was being prepared in those humble dwellings. Or perhaps he simply continued his routine of privileged isolation, never questioning the system that elevated him above the suffering masses. The beauty of history lies not just in the facts we can verify, but in the spaces between those facts where imagination can breathe life into the silence. We know that men like Godwin and Lord Aldrich existed throughout medieval Europe, their lives playing out in countless variations of the same fundamental story. We know their breakfasts differed as dramatically as their destinies, yet we can only guess at the thoughts that occupied their minds as they chewed their bread, whether mouldy or white, whether desperate or abundant. What we do know with certainty is that both types of breakfast, the peasant's struggle and the lord's abundance, helped shape the world that eventually became our own. Every grain of barley that Godwin planted, every decision that Lord Aldrich made in his administrative duties, every child who survived or perished based on the quality of their morning meal, contributed to the slow transformation of medieval society into something recognisably modern. The descendants of Godwin's children, if any survived to adulthood, might have eventually found opportunities that their father could never have imagined. Perhaps one became a successful merchant, breaking free from serfdom through trade and cunning. Maybe another learned to read and write, joining the growing class of educated clerks who would eventually challenge the absolute authority of the nobility. The breakfast that seemed like mere survival might have contained the seeds of social revolution. Similarly, Lord Aldrich's lineage may have found their privileged position increasingly difficult to maintain as the medieval world gave way to new forms of commerce and governance. The elaborate breakfast rituals that once reinforced divine authority might have become empty ceremonies in a world where wealth came from trade rather than land, where education mattered more than bloodline, where even peasants could dream of rising above their birth circumstances. The great irony of our medieval breakfast story is that it was recorded by people like us, individuals who exist in a time when the gap between the humblest and most privileged breakfast has narrowed considerably, yet has never entirely disappeared. We live in an age when information about nutrition travels instantly across the globe, when supply chains bring exotic foods to ordinary tables, when even the poorest communities have access to calories that would have amazed medieval lords. Yet hunger persists in our modern world, and abundance still creates its own forms of spiritual emptiness. The fundamental human experiences that connected Godwin and Lord Aldrich across their vast social divide continue to connect us across time. We still wake hungry, still seek nourishment that satisfies more than just physical need, still struggle with the gap between what we have and what we desire. Perhaps that's why their story feels so familiar, so strangely comforting as you sink deeper into sleep. These medieval lives remind us that human experience contains certain constants that transcend historical periods, social systems, and material circumstances. The need for food, for love, for meaning, for connection. These appetites remain as powerful now as they were in 1347, and they will likely persist long after our own era becomes historical curiosity for future generations. As you surrender to sleep, let the gentle weight of this realization settle over you like a warm blanket. You are part of an unbroken chain of human consciousness that stretches back through countless breakfasts, countless mornings, countless moments when people like you chose to wake up and face another day, despite uncertainty, hardship, or privilege that felt undeserved. Tomorrow, when you wake to your own breakfast, whatever form it takes, you carry within you the echo of every person who ever broke their fast in hope, in desperation, in gratitude, or in simple biological necessity. Your morning meal connects you to Godwin's mouldy bread and Lord Aldrich's honeyed figs, to every human being who ever felt the sharp pang of hunger or the comfortable fullness of satisfaction. Sleep well, knowing that you are both unique in your individual experience and universal in your human needs. Dream of medieval mornings if you like, or let your mind wander to breakfasts yet to come. In the democracy of sleep, we are all equal, peasant and lord, past and present, dreamer and dreamed. The morning bells of Thornwick Abbey have long since fallen silent, but somewhere in the world other bells are ringing, calling people to wake, to eat, to begin again the ancient human task of turning survival into something resembling meaning. And that, perhaps, is the most nourishing breakfast of all. You rest now in the space between stories, where the boundaries between medieval Astamore and your own world grow thin as morning mist. In this twilight realm of almost sleep, time moves differently, and you might find yourself sitting at a table that exists in no particular century, sharing a meal that transcends the limitations of any single historical moment. At this eternal breakfast table, the morning light streams through windows that could belong to any era, sometimes the precious stained glass of Ravenscroft Manor, sometimes the simple gaps between wooden boards in Godwin's cottage, sometimes the familiar transparency of modern glass that brings the outside world into clear focus. The light itself remains constant, that same solar radiance that has illuminated breakfast tables since humans first gathered around fires to share their morning sustenance. You might imagine Godwin sitting across from you, no longer hollow-cheeked with hunger, but filled out with the robust health that adequate nutrition provides. His hands, once cracked and bleeding from desperate labour, now hold a piece of bread, not mouldy, not mixed with sawdust, but the kind of honest, nourishing loaf that satisfies both body and soul. He eats slowly, not from desperation but from appreciation, savouring flavours that were once beyond his reach. Beside him, perhaps, sits Lord Aldrich, but stripped of the elaborate costumes that once marked his elevated status. His breakfast is simpler than the exotic feasts he once commanded, fresh fruit, perhaps, or eggs prepared without ceremony. He seems lighter somehow, as if the burden of maintaining absolute authority has been lifted from his shoulders, allowing him to experience food as nourishment rather than political theatre. Around this impossible table gather others whose breakfast stories have echoed through the corridors of time. The Egyptian pyramid builder who ate flatbread and onions before hauling limestone blocks under the desert sun. The Roman senator who dined on honey cakes while planning the conquest of distant lands. The Viking trader who shared salted fish with his crew before sailing into unknown waters. The colonial American farmer who ate cornbread by candlelight before heading to fields that would help birth a new nation. Each person brings their own morning rituals, their own relationship with the first meal of the day, yet all participate in the same fundamental human experience. They break their fast together, sharing not just food but the common understanding that exists among people who have known both hunger and satisfaction, who have faced uncertain days with whatever strength they could gather from their morning sustenance. The conversation at this eternal table flows across languages and centuries, but somehow everyone understands. They speak of children fed and lost, of harvests abundant and failed, of mornings when getting out of bed felt impossible, and others when dawn brought hope renewed. They share the wisdom that comes from lived experience, that food tastes better when shared, that hunger teaches gratitude, that even the simplest meal can become sacred when approached with proper reverence. You realize in this drowsy vision that you too belong at this table. Your own breakfast experiences, however ordinary they might seem, connect you to this endless chain of morning meals. The cereal eaten while rushing to work, the coffee sipped while checking messages, the leisurely weekend brunch shared with loved ones. All these moments participate in the same ancient ritual of beginning each day with conscious nourishment. The medieval world of Godwin and Lord Aldrich was not separate from your own. It was the foundation upon which your breakfast table stands. Every agricultural innovation that improved crop yields, every social change that reduced inequality, every medical advance that conquered nutritional diseases, all these developments flowed from the experiences of people who once woke hungry in stone cottages or silk-draped chambers. As your consciousness drifts further from waking awareness, the eternal breakfast table begins to fade, but its warmth remains. You carry with you the knowledge that breakfast is never just about food. It's about hope, about the daily choice to continue living, about the faith that this day will bring something worth the effort of rising to meet it. In your deepest sleep, you might dream of mornings yet to come, breakfasts shared by people whose names we'll never know, but whose fundamental experiences will echo our own. They too will wake hungry, will seek nourishment, will use their morning meal as fuel for whatever challenges await them. The external circumstances will change, the food will be different, the preparation methods will evolve, the social context will shift, but the essential human experience will remain constant. And when you finally wake to your own breakfast tomorrow, you'll carry with you the memory of all who came before and the anticipation of all who will come after. In the simple act of eating your morning meal, you participate in humanity's longest-running ritual, one that began with the first conscious person who decided that today was worth living and continues with every individual who makes that same choice each dawn. The story never really ends. It just changes characters, settings, and circumstances while maintaining the same essential plot. Consciousness awakens, hunger calls, nourishment is sought, and life continues one breakfast at a time. Rest now, knowing that you are both the inheritor of countless breakfast stories and the author of your own. In the morning, when hunger wakes you, you'll write the next chapter in humanity's endless breakfast tale. Sweet dreams of morning meals across time, and may your own breakfast tomorrow taste all the sweeter for having shared this eternal table, with the hungry and the fed, the powerful and the powerless, the living and the remembered. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.